Candice is a writer and commentator. Great to have you on the programme, Candice. How are you doing?
I'm good, Peter. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm very well. We're going to be talking, as I say, a bit later on to Nadine Dorries, the former Culture Secretary, on the Russell Brand. But this is the story that just keeps evolving, Candice, just keeps moving, and now the BBC ordering a review into his time there. Lots of broadcasters under lots of pressure because, of course, Russell Brand denies all the claims and allegations against him. Further claim being made yesterday about what allegedly happened in Soho at one stage. But I think it was 2003 at that stage, but that the alleged incident happened. But this is just not going away, Candice. What's your take on it?
Well, it's very interesting. I feel like this thing has gotten huge, and everyone is sort of now revising that period of time and saying what a terrible period of time it was and how a lot of that was considered acceptable. I mean, when I watched the Dispatches documentary on Channel 4 and the bit it opened up with about the terrible joke about choking a woman and finding it enjoyable, and people were laughing, and you just think, how did anyone find that funny? That was really disgusting. And
well, you're absolutely right, Candice, and I was kind of shocked by it. It's just not my humour at all. The BBC said it had removed some content. It says that now falls below public expectations, but essentially the BBC thought that it was okay to make those kind of jokes until these allegations were made. And it does seem that there are some very, very near the knuckle comedians. Listen, if you want to go to the Edinburgh Festival and see that kind of thing, or, you know, if it is your sort of thing, that's okay. I suppose I believe in free speech, even if it's offensive. But to talk about such violent acts, to talk about, you know, I don't want to go into too much detail because it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but that particular thing I think you're talking about, Candice, which I saw as well, was essentially using or participating in a sexual act, basically almost forcing a woman to take part in a sexual act, which would result in, you know, her mascara running and her being very upset, and, you know, this was to do with the joking about the sexual gratification of that. I mean, I just thought, in what universe do people go and pay money to go and see this kind of humour?
I know. I wonder, though, I mean, we would have been very young at the time when that came out. And now I just wonder if there's been a generational shift. And if it's possible that our generations, the millennials, just don't like that sort of thing. We think it's pretty horrible. I mean, millennials in particular have really been at the forefront of a lot of the Me Too stuff. Not just our generation. I mean, there have been a lot of older women as well who've said that, listen, this was acceptable when I was young, but as an older woman, I don't accept it now. And I find that fascinating. I find generational shifts fascinating. And also you'll find people at one time when they were maybe in their 20s and 30s and they liked stuff, in their 40s and 50s, their priorities completely change. And they'll think, actually, no, that wasn't right. And what I see at the moment is we've got such a very liberal society and a very permissive society. And there's so many attempts now, I think, to sort of tighten things up a bit. I mean, you see it with YouTube, for instance. I mean, you see how Silicon Valley has changed. I mean, it was a very freewheeling libertarian culture, but I don't think free speech is their number one concern now.
Well, what about that aspect in regard to Russell Brand, actually, Candice? Because I know you are an absolute advocate of free speech, but they are saying, and Julia Hartley-Brewer was pretty annoyed by this morning, they're saying that he can no longer make money from what he has on YouTube, from what the videos he's put on YouTube. I'm sure, you know, I would probably disagree with some of the stuff that's in there, and maybe agree with some of it as well. But the fact is, none of that is to do with the fact that he is alleged to be a sex offender, which he denies, of course. So should YouTube be able to cancel him in that way, do you think, Candice? Or should they as a business say, well, actually, this is something that is having a problem for the reputation of our business if we continue to allow Russell Brand to make money out of this?
I think that's the way they see it. Honestly, I think it's to do with reputational management. I can't say for certain because I don't know the exact
So what would you do, Candice? What do you think about that?
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't demonetize his account for. Look, you have to, when you're managing something, you have to set out the rules, right? I mean, you have to say, this is, if you violated these specific policies, we will take this action against you. And that's how you manage things. Obviously, you can't always have rigid rules. Sometimes you do need to be ad hoc with how you decide things, because otherwise you can end up with quite perverse situations where, you know, someone has done something, it's novel, you don't know how to deal with it, and you have to use your judgment in the situation. I think with Russell Brand, I don't think it's totally clear that he violated any of YouTube's rules. It seems they've connected it to something more vague, a reputational risk management rule, because they don't want to be associated with someone like that. I think this is how companies are now. I mean, you've seen it in the banking sector, you've seen it all over social media. I mean, you'll get companies like Rumble who'll just have an explicit commitment to free speech, but they've never really attracted the big advertising money, because I think advertising money doesn't tend to follow those platforms.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting, YouTube spokesperson said, if a creator's off-platform behaviour harms our users, employees or ecosystem, we take action. Well, we don't know if it has harmed anybody because, of course, he denies those allegations. Nothing is proven. Nothing is proven in law either. So perhaps they have gone too far in this. And I mean, Russell Brand has to be innocent until proven guilty. We may disagree with his comedy, but these are allegations, of course. On Monday, yesterday, of course, we know the Metropolitan Police had received another report of an alleged sexual assault in 2003. I wonder, Candice, one question, I was talking to a barrister yesterday, actually, who deals with a criminal barrister. And he said, you've got to ask the question, why do these women feel more comfortable talking to a journalist or a journalistic organisation than the police? Because as far as we know, none of the women who spoke to dispatches have so far, anyway, spoken to the police. And that's a very interesting one, isn't it? Because well, listen, their motivations, there are all sorts of reasons perhaps for the motivations for the people who spoke to dispatches on the Times and the Sunday Times. But there is the hugely, I would say, criminally small number of alleged rapes that actually become convictions, 1 in every 100, roughly. I mean, 99% of people who report rapes aren't lying. Some of them are lying, but not all of them are lying, are they? And this kind of cultural point of being sort of more willing to speak to a journalist, essentially, than the police, I think is one worth teasing out of this. I wonder what you think of that, Candice.
So from what I know, I'm not an expert on this issue, but I think a lot of women, when they are raped, which is so awful, they feel shame. They actually feel shame, and it can be a very difficult thing to come forward and speak openly about what happened to them because they think people will judge them, that they'll have been sullied in some way. So I think that when you start going through criminal proceedings as well, it can become very invasive, incredibly invasive. I mean, people will ask you very personal questions. I think now the police are more informed about trauma because that is one of the ways that when people can primarily get PTSD, it's by being raped. So they are a bit more sensitive about these issues, but it's a very difficult thing to go through. And sometimes as well, it can be his word versus her word, and that can be difficult to take to a court of law and to meet the standard of evidence required for a conviction. And I think that can sometimes be a problem as well. Also, sometimes it's not even criminal. It can just be very inappropriate behavior. So it's something that would be interesting to journalists, to the media, to society, but not necessarily something the police would be interested in. Yeah. It's such a complex area. Obviously, you are going to get cases of, where it's the evident that the boundary of evidence is clear, it can go to criminal proceedings, it can result in someone going to prison. But I don't think that's always the case. It's a very, very difficult area to operate.
You're absolutely right, Candice.